Hello, my name's Hannes, this is Painting by Letters, and today we're going to finish a project. So with this video I want to close out Project 2, Growing My Necrons. My Necron army at this point, and I'm taking this list from the Warhammer 40k app, which explains the ordering it's in. I've got a Catan Shard of the Void Dragon, I've got an Overlord, a Royal Warden, a Scorpek Lord, 10 Immortals, 20 Warriors with one kind of gun, and 10 Warriors with a different kind of gun, Canoptek Reanimator, 9 Caraptek Scarab Swarms, 3 Canoptek Wraiths, 2 Crypto Thralls, a Doomsday Ark, 10 Lich Guard, 3 Scorpek Destroyers. So what's left? Really it's the 3 Ophydian Destroyers. All in, with those models included, that is 1,970 points. When I started this project, I said that I wanted a full army for 10th edition. I will now have it. This video does close that project and that aim. Is it the best army in the world? No, of course it's not. Could things be improved? Yeah, they definitely could. I've got some ideas there myself. But is it a complete 2k list? It will be. So yeah, the army's getting quite sizable now, which is really nice. It feels, okay, 10th edition's been out for a while now, but it does feel like I'm sort of properly ready for it. I've got some centerpiece models, I've got a decent amount of foot troops, I've got some cool additional things, and really these 3 models will just cap all of that off. Much like the last video, this was shot during the week of the board build, so this was all done in one night. However, the style and the painting method I have for my Necrons is entirely doable in one evening. The one thing I am going to warn about, and I'm going to talk about quite a lot during this video, these models are flimsy. If you want to buy some, if you happen to pick up a boarding patrol, I guess they'd probably only be on eBay these days, but if you happen to get a boarding patrol, you happen to buy them separately, they are very, very, very flimsy. Anyway, you'll see. Building these models was a bit of a pain because of how spindly they are, but not too difficult. It is a relatively small kit, so was easy to do. However, when I was taking them out to prime them, I dropped these models. And they're just so weak, they just don't have the structural integrity that other models do have. You'll see when they're done, but I just want to have a bit of a pause and a comparison moment. I don't have them here because they're already painted and that would sort of ruin the flow of the video. But if you have a look at a Wraith is actually quite beefy. Despite the fact that it leans up, that tail is pretty much all one piece, which means that is, okay, it's actually 2 pieces, but that is quite solid. And the connections between them are a male and female connection, so they actually sort of plug into each other quite well. And because the contact area is quite large, there's a lot of place for the glue to get in there and to do something. As well as that, the body itself is very thick, and the connection points for all of these arms were again male-female connectors. There were pins going into sockets that lock everything into place. This has been designed to be sturdy despite the fact that it is sort of leaning over. This is a very well designed model. These destroyers are what happens, I think, when you sort of let a creative go wild with a really interesting idea that probably would work brilliantly in a video game or in Blender or something like that when you're building the 3D file. I just don't think it's sturdy enough once built in real life. Anyway, me complaining is not the point of this video. The point of this video really is to round off this project, and I only had about, I think it was about 2.5 hours once they were primed, maybe 2 hours, to paint these up in. So it's a bit of a speed painting. We're just gonna take a style that I already know works because I have closing on 2,000 points worth of Necrons in the same style, and we're just gonna replicate it as quickly as possible. We're just gonna take some shortcuts, that kind of thing. Obviously, if you're gonna do something like this, start with your basing, because lots of those basing products take an absolute age to dry. and reactivating them really isn't that fun. These models looked much better when they were done than they did about 3 hours afterwards, after some of the paint had seeped in and reactivated it in a couple of places. So do give it enough time to dry. Another thing I found out with this texture paste is do not try and hair dry it. It dries an outside layer that's then very thick, and then it keeps it very liquidy underneath. So it's probably best just to really leave it to cure. If you are going to do some speed painting, or you know that you need to get things done quickly, it might be worth doing this, leaving it for a few hours, then priming it, or even better, prime it in the evening, let's say. Then once the prime's dry, go back over with the texture paste and then probably just leave it overnight and come back the next day. But I didn't have time for that, so never mind. My painting style for Necrons is so down to a T at this point that it's almost autopilot. Blue rib cages first, because it takes about 2 thin coats and you want it dry before you put the contrast over it. Then I followed that up with my Agrax step. This goes over all of the metallics. It just creates a bit of depth in the metallics and just gives it a little bit of warmth as well with the slightly brown tinge. It's kind of a bit oily as well when fully applied. I do quite like Agrax. Then Warpstone Glow over the shoulders, similar to the blue rib cages. This is just a base coat. However, because we're going to be dry brushing over this green, it wasn't as important that it was stone dry by the time I was done, so I didn't mind this being a little bit later. Then in this case, I'm actually going to dry brush the weapons as well, because I wanted a bit of a practice with dry brushing, and dry brushing over different sizes seemed like a good way to do it. So just taking a red, painting in the weapons, and then we'll dry brush over the top of them at the end. The blue, the green and the red all took about 2 coats. I didn't film the second coat. Now our core colours are in, I picked out the Achelian green contrast and went over the blue as always. I found that mixing it 1 part contrast to 2 parts water works better over flat panels, and 1 part contrast to 1 part water works better over the rib cages, just if you are going to follow along at home with this. That seems to be the mix that I've landed on after a bit of practice with quite a few models, that I find it tints the flat panels quite nicely, but then when you need it to go into those recesses and properly darken them down, it just requires a little bit more of that contrast left in to do that quite effectively. After this, we're dry brushing the greens. You can see here that I've got a texture palette that I've been messing about with in a couple of videos. It's one of the Artis Opus ones. I just bought it from Element Games, just having a bit of a practice with the slightly different palettes and things like that. Really like this palette for what it's worth. Dry brushing the greens is really quick. I've got this down to an absolute T because I just use the 3 greens that I have in every single video, and then afterwards typically I mix in some yellow and I go to a pure yellow at the end. Although you barely notice the yellow, it just gives a little bit of a punch on the high end. One thing that I think might be interesting, and when I come to do the Silent King and stuff like that, I'm going to be thinking about, is maybe putting some blues in on the dark green end as well. So going a little bit colder to a little bit warmer. Might be interesting to try anyway. For the reds, I just picked out my usual colours, an orange and a yellow. It's all Vallejo, these ones. Due to my orange exploding in a previous video, I tried to get hold of a replacement for it, and actually buying it by itself was quite expensive, and I worked out how much it was going to cost me to do, because I'd probably have to buy a kit, and ended up actually going to GW and buying tons of reds, oranges, yellows to get a real proper range. So once these Necrons are done, I'm probably giving up on these Vallejo reds and oranges. They're just a little bit too glossy for me, and I'd rather have something a bit more satin, a bit more matte. So I'm going to have a bit of a go with GW the next time I try reds for an army. However, the process for dry brushing in this case was dead simple, just taking it slowly despite it being a speed painting challenge, because there's not that much there. For the little guy, I can never remember what they're called, because it was so small, I just wet blended it really quickly and it worked perfectly fine. It's not quite as vibrant as the dry brushing, but it does the job. Once I'd done that, I picked out the eyes, just a spot of that Vallejo light blue, just dotting it in there, and then typically I go back over, I didn't film this this annoyingly, but I go back over with the very watered down, so the 2-part to 1-part Achelian green, just to sort of give a blue tint around it as well. It takes max a minute, and I think as Necron eyes go, it looks alright. Then we came to the base, Blood Angels red, contrast, let it seep in, absolutely slosh it over. We want to reactivate this paint when we go back over it later, so there is nothing wrong with there being way too much of it. When I'd painted my Void Dragon recently, I'd really enjoyed the Duncan Rhodes purple colours, and so I thought I'd have another go with them on the talons here. With the Void Dragon, obviously it was its sort of spear, and here it's the talons. So using the deep purple to just give it a base coat, then at that point shading the top half of them with the mid, then using the lightest of the 3 paints as a highlight. Once complete, this is really vibrant, it looks really nice, really interesting. Would recommend following a similar recipe at home. Again, you can go look at that Void Dragon episode if you're interested. After this, just some Agarax on the ground, bringing some of that Blood Angels red and reactivating it at the same time to get the proper mix between the different colours, and then finally some black base rims. As I said, really simple, just following my traditional recipe. I think it was just over 2 hours when done, so it's a really effective way to paint models pretty quickly and have something that is to a decent tabletop standard very, very quickly. I don't want my negativity about the way that the structural integrity of the models are to really detract from the fact that I think they're really cool. It's just, you might not be able to see this, I don't know, but like if you tap on them, you just see them shake like mad, particularly that one, and that's the one that shattered. They just don't have the rigidity that you'd want from a model like this, but they do look really cool. It's kind of a shame because I don't really think that I can take them anywhere, and obviously with a 40k army, that's sort of what you want to do. You want to go to games, you want to share this with friends. I think I can only really play these at home because they are quite fragile, and I've already experienced how much of a nightmare it is to plug them back together again. Having said that, we're kind of done. This is a 2,000 point army. Oh, this isn't, but I have a 2,000 point army. This was the final unit left to take us to 1,970. So we're sort of done. My project to grow my Necrons into this army for 10th edition is finished. And now, when I come back to Necrons, it will be something that I want to add rather than something to get me to that milestone, which I think will relax things quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to that. That doesn't mean that Necron content is gone on this channel, nor does it mean that I'm going to stop doing Necrons or anything like that. Far from it. What's going to happen soon is I'm thinking about doing basically a combat patrol series where I'm going to try and collect a couple of combat patrols and put them together, and Necrons in particular I'm sort of 1 unit off, so there's definitely going to be something in there. And I've also got the Silent King to build, which I'm really excited for because it looks really good fun. So there is still more to come on this stuff, but I do think I think I jokingly called them RGB crons, didn't I, in an earlier episode. I think they're probably gonna hit the back seat now, at least for a little while I sort of build up my other armies and I start working through Leviathan and things like that, trying to get to a place where I've got other armies that are decently painted so that when friends come round we can have proper games as well, which I think would be really good fun, rather than one of us having to pick up an army from when I was a kid. That would be really good. But anyway, I'm really happy with how they turned out. I would recommend them for a painting project at home if you're looking for something that's a little bit different, particularly because you've got like the talons and the blades as well. They're a bit fun. And I am genuinely really happy with them, even if I've got some qualms about their structural integrity. But anyway, I've been Hannes, this has been Painting by Letters. Thank you so much for watching and keep safe out there.